a slideshow. It's not a very long slideshow, and it has been put together and prepared with assistance from multiple finance committee, select board members, as well as a lot of folks on staff, and Lynn Sanderson, our finance director. We hope that it will be informative. You can certainly stop me at any time as we work our way through it to ask questions about any particular slide. We have a couple of people who will be monitoring the folks who are online. So if you just raise your hand, you can stop and you can ask the question. But as we saw from the last time we did this last week, there's plenty of time at the end to ask questions and have discussion. And I can certainly go back to any slide that you'd like to reference as we go through the material. So either way, just let me know. So we'll start by explaining the difference between a Prop 2.5, basically a 2.5% increase in your taxes, and the override of a 2.5. And I'd also like to take just a quick moment to explain the real estate tax rate. So about, I think, around 10 years ago, the town of Hadley, as well as many other towns around us, adopted what's called Proposition 2.5. And ultimately what that means is that automatically each year, your taxes will go up 2.5%. Reason for that is to attempt to try to catch up with the normal increases that happen throughout the year, regardless of what's going on within your town. What the override part of that is what we're asking for as we move into this budget cycle, which is an increase of your taxes in addition to that 2.5. So I just want to make clear that everything that we're going to be discussing tonight, and I will remind you as we go through the slideshow, trust me, and I even forget, that all of the numbers that you're going to be seeing are the numbers that we are able to accurately calculate. So it's only the override increase that you are going to see. Because of the fact that everyone's assessed values are different, it's really difficult, and the fact that we're only in August of a fiscal year, it's really difficult for us to be able to calculate the 2.5 part of your tax increase. So all of the numbers that we're going to be discussing tonight are only based upon the override over and above that number. Now, as far as real estate tax goes, real estate tax is the tax rate, is the amount of tax stated in terms of a unit of the municipal tax base. And what that is it's usually in Massachusetts referred to as dollars per thousand of assessed value. The tax rate is calculated by dividing the amount of revenue a city or town needs by the total taxable valuation of the properties within the municipality. So essentially, if you do that mathematical equation, you will get a decimal figure. You'll then take that decimal figure and multiply it by 1,000. I will show you, if you have that one-page form in front of you, there's actually a way to kind of work this backwards and be able to calculate what your tax increase will be, so long as you know the assessed value, that your assessed value. And essentially, you just work it backwards. You'll take your assessed value, you divide it by 1,000, and you'll have a whole number. Then you'll take that number and then you multiply that by the tax rate. So if you want to know what your taxes are currently, know your assessed value, you divide it by 1,000, and then you multiply that by the current tax rate here in Hadley. When we get to what we'll be asking for, the new tax rate, you'll be able to do the same thing. I'll also show you where you can find a one-page document on Mass DOR on the mass.gov website, which is all map for you, so you don't have to worry. So, what we're going to be talking about tonight are two different override requests. One of them is an override request for a general operations budget, and essentially, this is your day-to-day operations for the town of Hadley. This includes your public safety departments, your town hall, your library, your senior center, which we're in right now, all of the day-to-day operations, public works, and things like that. We will take that general operations budget, we will break it into 3 different parts, just so it's a little bit easier to understand, but the number for that is a single number. The second portion of this is for capital maintenance, okay? This will be a completely separate override vote. They both have to go to town meeting. They both have to pass at town meeting. And if they both pass at town meeting, then they will both separately go to a ballot vote, which you'll be able to go, just walk into a box and check which one, either or neither. If neither of them pass at town meeting, you won't have to worry about the second part. What the capital override request is going to entail is essentially, those are things for building repairs, equipment replacement, infrastructure upkeep. If the DPW has, miles of water line and things like that that need to be repaired, these are things that would go into a capital maintenance budget. We have had an issue over the course of the last many years, probably here in Hadley, where we build beautiful buildings like this, and we don't put enough money into any type of a maintenance account to take the proper care of them that we should. One of the things that we'll be able to use this money for in this capital line should it pass is for things like that. And ultimately, what it comes down to is that the operational budget is one separate number, and that includes, again, your staff and things like that, and the capital maintenance is going to be for your capital lines. So here's the first part of the operational override money. Over the course of the last couple of years, the fire department added several employees. Basically, for the first time in history, went to a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week fire department. Previous to this, it was a call force with, I believe they had 2 or 3 full-time firefighters. That has been remedied. Unfortunately, the problem is that it was never placed into the operational budget. The town used stabilization funds and monies from free cash to fund these positions over the course of the last couple of years. We can get into detail a little bit later, some specifics from both the Finance Committee and the Select Board to explain how we got there. But essentially, the important part is to understand that this number right here is going to fully fund a fire department that was never fully funded. So this will give you 24/7 coverage. And that's the first portion of that $2,250,624 that we are asking for the general override, the operational override. Here's the second part of that top number, $2.2 million for the operational expenses. $338,404 is essentially for every other department in town. Every other department in town has had their budget reduced and cut to the point where we know that we will get through FY26, which is the budget cycle we're in right now, but we cannot sustain that to make it into FY27. That's just for the operations of every other department besides the fire department. That includes school, town hall, council on aging, library, police, dispatch, departments like that. And then unfortunately, we were hit with 2 massive health insurance increases. The first health insurance increase came just prior to beginning the FY26 budget, which was a little bit more than a month ago. And we were forced to add an additional $330,000 to cover health insurance costs. About 2 to 3 weeks ago, Linda, is that about right? About 2 to 3 weeks ago, we received an additional mid-year health insurance increase of 20%, which equates to $486,000. So we had to add that and factor that into this as well. So the second portion of the general fund request, the $824,404, is a combination of these 2 items. And here's the final portion. $846,785 in free cash. We'll get into explaining a little bit about what free cash is and what it's normally used for a little bit later in the slideshow. But free cash is generally used to make additions to your department, make additions to your town. It's what it's supposed to be used for. And the Finance Committee and select board have been working really hard over the course of the last several years to use less free cash to balance the budget. Meaning, we're short X amount of dollars. Let's take from free cash to get a balanced budget. They've been trying to do that less and less and less, so that you'll have free cash available should you need $489,000 for health insurance increases that nobody could predict. Unfortunately, with the reductions in our revenues and the increases in our expenses, Linda and I had to use the entire amount that we had allocated in free cash just to balance the budget that we are in currently. So we are going into the next budget cycle with no free cash. The other portion that makes up this final portion of the request are employee compensation increases. Multiple years ago, the town embarked on a wage study, basically a compensation study which measured wages of its employees across the breadth of the town against other communities of similar size. Recommendations were made, employee increases were given to the tune of approximately $250,000, and that's for more than 100 staff members. And then the final part of this is the balance in free cash, which was carried over from the prior year. That was also used as well. So that's money that we would like to put back in with this request for the general fund override. With regards to personnel, this is just a quick slide explaining staff increases so that people can get an idea of what has been going on here for the last several years, and kind of form an opinion on where we are. David Nixon, when he was the town administrator back in fiscal year 2019, used to do an annual FTE analysis. And what an FTE analysis is, it's a full-time equivalent. And part-time personnel, half-time personnel, full-time personnel all work into that equation. And so, unfortunately, the last one that was done was in FY19. So what we did is 7 years later, we did another one for this slideshow, just to give people an idea of how the town has grown. In FY19, we had 85 personnel. On July 27, 2018, that was recorded. And again, that includes both full-time and part-time folks across the breadth of the town. And 7 years later, we are at 114 personnel. So that's an additional 29 individuals, both full-time and part-time. And I just think it's important to make sure that the folks understand these individuals that were hired over the course of the last 7 years went through the same budget processes, the same finance committee and select board meetings, and the same town meetings to add these additional positions. So this is where we are, and it does obviously affect the amount that we need, but it also, again, each one of these positions were justified as necessary and made it through, again, this budget process that we have. All right, so here's just a simple budget sheet showing you FY26, what was voted at town meeting, and FY26 with the additional increases that we need when we ask for this override. As you can see on top, that free cash number is the same. We utilized the entire amount for the FY26 budget, and we would like to put that back in. Without putting free cash back into the override, I believe we are being short-sighted, and we're not setting ourselves up to be able to move into FY27 and beyond with nothing in the way of free cash. The fire and EMS, we showed you that slide at the very beginning. That's the 579 that will fill out their department and finally budget for a full-time fire department. Again, the rest of the town is the 338. And then, of course, that mid-year health increase brings us to the 2.250624 number that we're going to be asking for. This is just kind of a summary showing you each department within within the request, just to kind of break it down a little bit further for you. And this is minus that free cash number. This is just the operations. This is the operations of the town. So if you look in the shaded column, that's what was voted and approved at town meeting. In the clearer column, the FY26 additional needs, what we did was we asked each and every department head to come back in, and we ran them through another full budget session, which means we made cuts for the shaded section, and that's what we put in front of you to vote for FY26. We cut it as much as we possibly could without losing any staff. Several of the department heads immediately said, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it through this cycle. I'm not going to make it through this year. I can't pay for our telephone, things like that. So we began this process of looking at how much money we would need if we were to ask for an override. So we invited each one of the department heads to come back in and show us where they were short. Those numbers that you see there are not what they asked for. Each and every department asked for more than what is there. And we sent this through yet another budget reduction process to try to ensure that we could tell residents that we did everything we could to keep it as low as possible. And so ultimately, your department heads in this town are telling us that they need more money than is there, but we still went ahead and again put them through the paces to make sure that we're being as frugal as we possibly can. So this is the second part of the override request. This is your capital stabilization fund. And again, we went over the reasons that that this is needed. I think everyone kind of agrees. If you watched the buy board meeting last night, it was completely unanimous on both sides. This is something that we have been lacking for many, many years. And it's something that's really needed in order to take care of the things that we have built and bought and paid for. And it also will put us in a position as this account grows to be able to buy things in cash instead of having to borrow. There are a lot of different departments that are kind of vying for this money, but at least it'll put us in a position where we don't have to borrow for absolutely every single thing that we. This is a chart which shows the Hadley tax rate from 2003 to 25. This slide was slightly altered based upon some really good questions and comments from the last forum that we had. As you can see, the highest it was in 2004. And Sue Golotsky, our collector, jumped in and reminded us that the reason that the tax rate was that high is because the town added 2 buildings in that year and did a debt exclusion for both buildings, so the taxes went up. 2008 was the lowest. And that was likely due to kind of a trending downward of values. And then as you can see, it trended back up. And then if you look all the way over there on the end, that's where we are right now. That's present day. And that is $11.63. So this is kind of the nitty-gritty part of it. This is what people probably really want to know. What are my taxes going to look like if we pass all of this? If you pass the general override and the capital maintenance override, the total will be $2,550,624, and it will increase the Hadley tax rate from that $11.63 on the previous page to $13.57. And again, just a reminder, that does not include any valuation changes for the current fiscal year that we're in or the 2.5 part of that. This is just kind of a grid that shows surrounding communities and the tax rate comparison. All of these communities, with the exception of, I think, Sunderland, are in Hampshire County along with us. And as you can see, Hadley is here on the bottom. with the lowest of these tax rates. And this is where we would be if the entire override passes. The only town that would be less than us is Sunderland at that point. And again, just a reminder, this does not include the 2.5 part of any increases. All right, so this is what I explained to you earlier, folks. If you go on mass.gov and you just go to the search engine that's on mass.gov on their website and you type in Proposition 2.5, it will give you a whole list of different hyperlinks that you can click on. And one of those hyperlinks is called Property Tax Impact Calculator. Click on that, it will bring up a single page. There's a drop-down screen that you can find Hadley. It will give you all of the current tax rates and all of the current numbers for the town of Hadley. And then there'll be a box right underneath that where you can type in the override number. Then you can type in any number that you want to see what your taxes are or would be. The reason that we selected these three amounts is because the average assessed value here in Hadley is 453,000, somewhere around that, 459,000, one of those two numbers. And so that's why we kind of selected this and picked one on the top and one on the bottom. And again, you can go all the way, I believe, down to the bottom to over $1 million in assessed value. And so what it comes down to is this is the current tax rate. And for these assessed values, this is your current tax bill. If you were to pass the entire override, this is what the tax rate would go to, from 1163 to 1357. And this is the estimated tax bill that you would have based upon these assessed values. So the increase, the difference essentially for each one of these assessed values is over here on the right. And this right here after this slash would be the monthly additions, the monthly increases to cover, again, the full override of the bus. So what is free cash? Free cash, and again, the reason that we're talking about free cash is just how important it is, we think, to the future fiscal years outside of FY26. Free cash is remaining unrestricted funds from the operations of the previous fiscal year, including unexpended free cash from the previous year, which, as you saw from the previous slide, we spent current free cash and the previous free cash to balance this year's budget. Actual receipts in excess of revenue, and we generally take a hit on our certified free cash based upon this last sentence here. Unpaid property taxes and certain other deficits that the town has will reduce the amount of free cash that gets certified by DOR annually. What are unrestricted funds? I guess the easiest way to explain it is to kind of work backwards. There are such things as restricted funds, in that there are certain budget accounts which are only allowed to be spent on certain items. At the last meeting, CPA came up. CPA funds come in and are held in an account and can only be used for certain purposes. Free cash are unrestricted funds. So there are certain funds that come in that allow the town to use them for any purpose. And generally, over the course of the last many years, with the exception of the last few, this town has utilized free cash to balance their budgets. And again, FinCom and Select Board have done a really good job with Linda to reduce doing that, just to lessen that impact. But unfortunately this year, the cliff, the wall, however you want to describe it, forced us to utilize that. So here are your certified free cash balances, what we have had over the course of the last 4-5 fiscal years. FY20 was the lowest. This was COVID, 21 coming out of COVID, 22 when everybody wanted to go out to dinner again and everything's wonderful. And then 24 where we are right now in the last certified free cash amount we have is just over $1 million. The frightening part about the whole thing is that, again, as I mentioned many times, we used the entire amount of free cash that we had. And based upon Linda's projections, we only expect in the upcoming fiscal year about 300 to 500,000 to come in for free cash. So that puts us right back into some area of focus. Linda, did you have anything you wanted to add about free cash?
Yes, because I just heard some misperceptions last time about how much money we had each year and people kind of adding it up and saying, well, that's $3 million. This is, think of the free cash as a snapshot of what your balance is here and in the checking account as of a certain date. So we had a balance at 333 at the end of 20. We had a higher balance at the end of 21 when things started to bounce back. And then 1.7 was our peak. These 3 years are very unusual years. I know my first 5 years here before 20, the usual amount of free cash was $500,000 to $700,000. We were happy when it was over $700,000. So I don't want it to look like we're really dropping off drastically. These are the unusual years. Because see, we started out with 333,000, 20. We really weren't even feeling the impact of COVID yet because we weren't all sent home till middle of March. And most of the revenues that we get in are lagging, so it would have been a solid year that brought us down to 330,000. So that's about it. And the largest factor in those years were that we were under projecting revenue because we had to match 20 and 21 the low years, and so each year more money was coming in than we had projected. And now we're back down to being within a few, being able to predict within $300,000 to $500,000, and we're still getting a rollback from unspent budget amounts. People are, their departments are spending their full budgets. So we do have the difference this year is about 500,000 extra that we have after the excess revenues and the budgets. And as Mike mentioned, there are other factors. And usually other factors only go in one direction. So that's why we're sort of trying to underscale it. But $500,000 is not the $800,000 that we used in this year's budget, which is why we're trying to get out of that cycle now.
Okay, stabilization fund. I mentioned this just kind of in passing earlier, and that's how we funded the fire department for at least I think 2 portions of it in 2 fiscal years. The easiest way to explain this is kind of your rainy day fund. Right? This is emergency fund. This is the fund that you only dip into when things are really bad. We did utilize some of this money to fund the fire department over the course of the last couple of years. And here's your balances, similar grid as the free cash. And there is just, one thing I'd like to note is that this number actually, this is our current balance in free cash. This number actually should be less. I'm sorry, stabilization. This number actually should be less because we spent, I believe, down to 1.7 million in that account. And Linda is in charge of making investments for the town. And she has made some really good investments. And this line is actually building upon itself. There was actually some discussion in the beginning when we were talking about an override about asking for potentially a third bullet point, a third type of request, which was to replenish your stabilization fund. We are in such a good place based upon the good work that has done that everyone kind of agrees that there's really no reason to do that. It's building upon itself. So we're in good shape when it comes to that. And here's the last type of fund that we have that kind of applies to what we're talking about right now. This is your capital stabilization fund. This is where if you approve the capital request, the $300,000 for the capital override. This is the fund that it will go into. This was created in 2010. And again, it was created for the purposes of purchasing capital improvement type items, replacement fire trucks, replacement ambulances, cruisers, DPW vehicles, significant improvements upon buildings and things like that. And this is the balances, just so you have one for the last several years. Obviously, FY20, we didn't have a lot in there. We have 56,552 in there, but just to put that into perspective, you know, if you wanted to buy a fire truck out of this, that's not going to get you. It'll get you maybe a third of the way there, a quarter of the way there. So this is something that we love to put a lot of money in, and it will grow upon itself, and we'll be able to move forward when it comes to buying things with cash as opposed to borrow. All right, believe it or not, there is some good news based upon just really kind of the amazing work that a lot of your volunteer boards here have done over the course of the last several years, and your finance director. We have maintained our bond rating, which means that as we borrow, we can borrow at a much lesser interest rate. This override does not add any positions. If you consider the fire department positions being added, then those are the only positions that are added, but technically those were added a year ago. But it does not give any department any extra money to add positions. This request is to get us back to our head above water, back to zero basically. And again, I think that it is a testament to both the finance committee and the select board that we were able to make it through all the way back to COVID without having to lay anyone off or cut service, any type of services to the town, going through all of that. And that's with a priority. I think everyone would agree has always been try to keep the tax rate as low as possible here in this town. And, you know, the services that this town does offer, I think folks would agree are quality services. And again, we were able to make it through all of those tough times while keeping the tax rate low. This override request will allow us to stay there. We're at that top meeting right now, and there will be 2 more of these. We're going to do one in the middle of the day, so folks that don't want to stay out until 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night can come. They'll all be here, and they'll also be online if anybody wants to watch. And last night at the board meeting, well, that was the last slide anyways, but no, I have now. So the special town meeting will be on September 9th. There it is. September 9th, 2025 at 7 p.m. at Hopkins Academy. Last night, the select board and finance committee agreed upon that date. We also selected a date for the ballot vote should these 2 articles or one of the 2 articles pass at the special town meeting. And we are aiming for September 29th. And the voting will be here. We'll obviously put out all that information as soon as we possibly can, as soon as we get through these public forums. I would like to open it up to questions right now for anything that you'd like to ask about. And I have, again, both select board and finance committee here to help answer these questions. And we have Linda over there to bring kind of those data-driven numbers questions.
I just wanted to touch on a couple things based on feedback from the last public forum. Could you go back to the stabilization balance slide there?
Sure.
So you'll
Capital
see
stabilization or regular stabilization?
regular stabilization. All right, so you'll see in FY21 that there was a decent drop. And I had a question about why that happened. And during COVID, we didn't know what was going on, and basically we chose to borrow from ourselves in order to balance the budget and keep the tax bills about stable because we didn't know what was going on with unemployment, revenues, things like that. With the pledge that we would return that money to stabilization, which we did when it was a year or 2 years ago.
Right, one of those years when we had all that free cash.
Yeah, yeah. So we ended up putting back the 300,000 or 350,000 that we removed from stabilization back into that rainy day fund eventually, what we said we would. The other question I had is, how do you know what your house value is? Because I had people looking on Zillow and places like that, and there were some outrageous values. So either look on that green tax bill you got, you can call the assessor's office, or if you just Google Hadley GIS, which stands for Geographical Information System, and you can type in your address, and then there's something called CAI property card. Click on that, and it'll give you exactly what the assessors are valuing your house at. So you can plug those numbers into the DR calculator and see what your tax is going to be. Don't go on Zillow first.
Right, we did the next.
Hang on, Dave.
Oh. Hi, you want to say my name and information?
Sure.
Okay, Nancy Barron, 17 High Meadow Road. So related to that, when is our next real estate assessment?
We can find out in the next round. We'll let you know.
Thank you.
Right, route.
Yeah. Any other questions? Peter? Yes, sir.
Okay, when it comes to our taxes, say it. With the value of my house and that 1357, which now we're proposing, my tax bill is about 8250. So every year, there's gonna be a 2.5 tax onto that bill every single year. So, correct, so if I'm right, so if the first year is gonna be 8150, then after with the 2.5%, that's an additional $205. Then after that, added to that over 5 years, my taxes are gonna go from 8142, 5 years, to $9,200. So that's an addition. In 5 years, with this tax base, it's gonna go up an extra $1,100. So that's just me. I'm a full-time self-employed. What about those that have those fixed incomes? That they're gonna have to be dealing with, not just that. Everybody's calling it an override. This is a permanent tax increase that every year, 2% is gonna be added on to their tax bill every single year. So if mine's adds 600, those that are at 400, you have to think about an additional every single year, you're gonna have to pay those that are on those fixed incomes, trying to figure out how to pay your mortgages when it comes to this tax bill. So it's not just 2.5%, it's 2.5% every single year and every single time I was going to move, just so everybody understands.
So on that topic, had some conversation with the collector's office. And obviously, we're well aware of the burden that is being placed on folks with fixed incomes. There's no question that there are people in town who are, house rich, but their income may not be the case. We understand that. Can't remember the code section, Sue Watson, even remember, but it's like 71D or something like that. So there is actually a program out there for people with lower income. You can look up, you can call the collector's office and our assessors and contact the exact criteria. It does not look at your assets or the value of your home. It's strictly looking at your income. So there is some relief available for folks who fall within that band. Interestingly, what I was told is that there are only 1 or 2 people in town actually taking advantage of that. We suspect there are probably more who qualify. At least we're proud people, and I think that, everybody's wonderful about paying their taxes, but that may be something we as a leadership need to do a little bit more advertising on, if you will, to make sure people are eligible. I think they get a fixed rate of like $175 knocked off the bill. And then the other thing is the collector's office. We have an extremely high collection rate. We're the envy of most of the collectors in Massachusetts. So thank you, collector's office. Typically around 99%, 98%, we're right up there. Part of the reason for that is our collector's office. They're more than happy to work out payment arrangements with folks. And we would imagine, again, should the override pass, we may have people who are need some help budgeting and things like that. So we're very committed to helping people make this work.
And I made the statement at the last meeting, I'll make it again. Everybody at these tables is taxpayers as well as you folks out there. And multiple of us are commercial and residential owners, so we're gonna get hit twice. And nobody woke up this morning saying, oh boy, tax rate's gonna go up, I'm so excited. But the reality is that the town needs this money, keep itself at the service level, employee level that it is now. And that's the decision we'll have to make, whether we feel that it's worth spending the money on, and I believe it is. Mr. Neal, you said you had a question. Oh.
Bad luck. I know it's one thing right. Paul, hi, Paul Benjamin. I've been on this committee now for four years. And it was immediately evident when I got on here that we were using free cash and stabilization in the way we should.
Microphone, Paul.
Sorry. That we were using stabilization and free cash in the way that we should. The committee, our committee, brought that to the select board, and I think there was the decision to try and wean ourselves off of that over time, and it has been reduced, but we're now up against the wall. The reason that was done was to keep your taxes low. I mean, having had increased your taxes 5 or 6 or 7 years ago at a rate higher than you've been doing, you would have paid more taxes in the past, but you wouldn't see as big an increase to that. We might have been keeping better pace with the exception of expanding the fire department to the full time, which I think is very important for us, and also this surprise we got on our healthcare costs. The fact that we will continue to be the number one, the lowest tax rate in Hampshire Town is still a testimony to how well we're managing this town. It's also testimony to what the commercial zone that we have is doing and contributing to our community. And that's not just Walmarts and places like that, it's entrepreneurs. And I'll take part of that too, because I own real estate in this town that's commercial. What else are we gonna do to try and improve the situation long term? Besides being very careful with our budgeting, and our purchases. Remember, this town votes for all this stuff. We're also looking at ways to increase our revenue. So how do you do that? Well, you look at your zoning and you say, what's holding back more commercial development? What's holding back certain types of other developments? And so, in the past few years, there's been changes to expand the senior housing overlay district, which is going to have some new developments that are going to be contributing to our community. That's going to affect our tax rate. We don't have to do malls no more. In fact, we know one of our malls that we declared that for us. So we have to come up with new ways to attract other types of commercial development in our community. And that's one of the things that the planning board is working on, the select board are working on, that will be coming in with changes to bylaws that we are going to have to vote on. Years ago, there was a change to allow Lowe's to come into town, that development brings a lot of tax revenue, but we had to make some changes to fill in. We did the same thing with senior housing. So there are things like that that are being looked at very, very strong to try and get that control on what our expenses are by bringing in more revenue. That doesn't include increasing your taxes. But right now, this is a reset that we absolutely need. And I think it's really important for the town that we take that on. I think we're in a position where we could have paid this money out earlier
for the fire department, you gotta put them right into the budget. But we didn't do that because we had free cash to borrow and we didn't want to increase taxes. So this is catching. So. And the healthcare, again, if you've been watching, if we read the Gazette or the last line, all the towns around us are in the same boat. Front page news, was Belfry County the other day, it was over $900,000, their bill. It's devastating. This is just devastating. And, you know, we are gonna have to look at what are we gonna do? We may have no choice, we may stay in the school, we may be able to look at some other alternatives. That won't happen overnight. Because we have contracts with unions and employees, we have everything that we can. Those are the kinds of things that I think we're gonna be looking at. Very complex. But I can tell you that, you know, our committee is, we don't agree on everything, but we do agree on trying to keep that simple. And not even paying attention to the wire.
Bill at 17 High Road. First of all, just thank you, good words there. And thank you for your work. You know, it's been very stressful and a lot of hours. I guess one of the things I wonder about is you get the reset sheet that is successful. Who takes the lead role to help every department sort of live within that new work, you know, reset, push you someplace you weren't, and then every department has to sort of own living within that world. Is that something that is a shared leadership thing for all the departments? Is the town administrator do it? I'm just curious who gets done.
That's a great question. I think it might help if I just briefly describe what the budget process looks like. I can answer the question easily by saying all of us will likely handle that role. But the way that the budget process works is this, or I should say has previously worked, because we are intending on changing things, especially if we get this open up. The way the budget has previously worked is the department heads build their budgets, they bring their requests in to the finance director and the town administrator who used to, I only sat through one on this side of the table. And they make their requests and they make their pitch and they argue for what they feel that they need. Ultimately, what we usually do is we go through their budget, we look at their spending, where they are within that cycle of the fiscal year, and we ask them to make reductions, or we'll make reductions for them. And after we go through each and every department, we will then go to the finance committee. They do the same thing. Then after that, it goes to the select board. Generally, they'll do a 5-board meeting where they have that discussion. How we intend on handling this in the future, Linda will still be here. I don't know if I'll still be standing here with a professional. Is we will be giving them the number that they will have to work with. This only works if we can get back to zero, as Paul mentioned, because we don't know what every department is going to look like if we don't get the override. But assuming all things work and we come out of this back to even, we will be giving the department the parameters that they can work within, and the department head will then have to build their budget within that one. We'll be using each department head's total number. Sorry, to build it within the totality of the budget. Our town budget is $22 or so million, and we'll be doing that with each and every department. Linda, if you want to add to that, that's just kind of a general idea, but.
Sure, the one thing I want to add is we actually do start with revenues. We begin by predicting the revenues so we know what the total budget needs to stay within. And that's the estimate we've made, and then we go through everything like that, Mike described, and well, over $200,000-300,000 short, or we have the budget set and then there's gets devised by an expense rather than flat budgets. We how are we gonna come up with this extra money? And that's where we end up using free cash. And every time you use free cash, that builds a new expectation in the next year's budget, that you've got that to work with again, because you built the budget up to that level. And we really were, as Mike explained earlier, it was coming down and we got caught with the, trying to, after going through what we did, we were trying to build the ambulance program and then pulling back from that. You know, with the insurance and a few other things and study for the wages. We were able, because we had those figures, you saw how much we had in free cash, we were able to say, okay, we'll put the free cash in and to make up as if we had the extra revenue. And hopefully revenue will outgrow us next year. And given the rates that they're having, the pace that it's going for a few years, that is a shock until this year, but it just kind of leveled out. So now the reset, the telling budgets, departments how much they have to work with, is going to be within the revenues.
Just one of the things I want to, just in the spirit of moving forward and trying to recognize where maybe there are some inherent weaknesses that we'd like to strengthen. We formed a committee called affectionately what is the form of government committee. We've met now for most of the year. So from the select board, David and I sit on that committee. We have other representatives as chair right now by Mary Carney. And we've been taking a look at and interviewing municipal employees, department heads, and trying to find out, you know, where is it structurally that make it difficult to do your job? Where might there be some lack of clear accountability, which I think is, you know, point that you're asking about, Bill. In terms of budgeting, we have a very distributed form of government right now. I mean, this is the executive branch, if you will, but not everybody reports to the town administrator. So town administrator does the best that they can, but there are some areas where there are these other side committees that sit. So sometimes the accountability can get a little mushy. And that's something that we're absolutely trying to address. And the committee's already come up with a number of recommendations, but like everything in municipal government, it takes time. But just know that that's something we are absolutely working on, again, in the spirit of trying to make it better.
Okay.
One of the things that this, if it passes, budget will do for us is it will help make up the cuts that the various departments have taken since COVID. I can speak definitely for the senior center that the actual money for programs, for personal training, things like that, would be reduced every year so that there's nothing left to take out of the budget. So some of that would be put back so that the departments can work on the level.
It's a great point. The priority that I have with both of the budget processes that we went through, the original FY 26 and then the second one, the priority obviously was to keep staff, keep our employees, we met the lady off. So all of those cuts came from all of the expense lines. So, you know, again, some of these departments came in and said, I can't operate with the amount of money that we've left me. Departments like our public works department has certain jobs and certain things that he likes to accomplish each and every year, or some things that he needs to accomplish every year. We need to paint lines on the roads, we need to fix the potholes, we need to be able to plow. We need to be able to take trees down before they fall on folks' houses and things like that. And when you cut those expense lines, you can only do that much work. Once we hit that mark, I'll give you an example. We last year we've been discussing with our legislators how to apply for and actually obtain grants so that we can fix our levy system. Several years ago, we had a break in the levy or damage that occurred that we had to have emergency fixes. That was simply emergency fix. That's not, the project is not complete. One of the things that is required is maintenance of your levy. And part of maintenance is being able to mow it and being able to look for animal burrows, which usually cause the start of the levee falling apart. What's it cost to mow? 30 grand? $30,000 because we have to bring in a machine that has an articulating arm that's longer than anything most anyone has to get all the way down to the river to be able to mow it. And so if we cut that budget to 15, we can mow half the levee. So those are the types of things that we had to do when we went through everyone's budget and made those cuts, just to make sure we get some. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry.
Any questions? Is the insurance trust making any changes in order to avoid some of these spikes? One, and then number two, do the override amounts take into account future health insurance increases as well as those contracts that are currently in negotiation?
Lauren, you want to answer that health insurance still? The short answer to the second part of it is if we get the operational override, then it will absolutely put us in a position with, as Peter had mentioned earlier, the additional 2.5 that continue onto that permanent increase, be able to continue to pay employees' salaries into the future. The answer is yes to the second question. Or third.
Hang on, Lauren. I was remiss in not introducing this young lady over here, Miss Lauren Wilcox, our HR director.
Thank you. So the New Hampshire County Insurance Trust, they are looking at making some changes. No changes will go into effect without, negotiating with the union. But yes, they're looking at making changes.
Essentially what they told us was if there's 72 communities that are a part of that trust, or 72 entities, I should say. I don't know if they're all actual communities. They get to make the decision as to whether or not they want to pay this money, and hopefully they decided to do it because if the trust members voted no, we were told that the Hampshire County Trust would go out of business. They would literally close their doors. And so that would require us to all either go find another trust to be a part of, which they're all facing the same increases, or cover all of our claims on our own. So that's, I think I mentioned last time, possibly the worst thing you could do with a budget is put a budget in front of residents with a question mark there. We had to cover our own claims. It's a giant question mark each and every year. And it's just not good business practice. Eric?
And you're there on Jennifer, at the CPA, and last week there was some questions on the CPA, and I just wanted to mention that if somebody increased, say, $800 in their real estate tax bill with this override, which is probably what we said the average was about. The CPA is 3% of that tax increase, so that people would pay an additional $24 for the CPA. And the state matches every year what we pay for CPA. And over our 20 years, they average 68%. So if somebody pays an extra $24 for CPA, the state's matching about $16. We get that additional revenue. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Again, thank you all for coming. If you think of anything, you can call me, you can email me at the office. I'll shoot your email to whichever department it needs to go to. If I can't answer your question, and you are more than welcome to think of another question, come to either one of the next two forums and fire away. You know, try to be as transparent as we possibly can. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Please talk to you about the you look at it, obviously it's our favor. Yeah. Yeah, you'll be fine. That is. How are you?
We don't have to push this.
We fixed it, okay, we're trying to make it better, so we got a new mixer, and so far it's working out so good, I think.
I was on the building committee, it was well this, but nobody really started like this. No, it was how many people we have black everything.
That's okay, we make good all that. Take care, next time. Have a good day. Good night. We're trying to. And not because I. What's that? How we get it all every time.
Recording stopped.
It's like, it was recording, that's why.
That's awesome.